DepEd Vision. We dream of every Filipino who passionately love their country and whose values and competences enable them to realize their full potential and contribute meaningfully to building the nation. As a learner-centered public institution, the Department of Education continuously improves itself to better serve its stakeholders. DepEd Mission. To protect and promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable, and culture-based and complete basic education where students learn in a child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating environment. Teacher facilitate learning and constantly nurture every learner. Administrators and staff ensure enabling and supportive learning environment for effective learning to happen. Family, community, and other stakeholders actively engage and share responsibility for developing lifelong learners. DepEd Core Values: Maka-Diyos, makatao, makakalikasan, at makabansa. Republic Act No. 1124, an act creating a Board of National Education charged with the duty of formulating general education policies and directing the educational interests of the nation. The Section 1 stated that the creation of Board of National Education, which is responsible for the formulation and implementation and enforcing the general educational objectives and policies, and to coordinate the offerings, activities, and functions of all educational institutions in the country, integrating and the nationalistic and democracy-inspired educational system. So basically, the Section 1 is about the creation of national education board, which shall carry the responsibilities assigned to them. Section 2 is the composition of the Board of National Education, which composed of the following. First is the Secretary of Education. Second is the Chairman of Committee on Education in the Senate. Third one is Chairman on the Committee of Education in the House of Representatives of Congress. Number 4 is the Director of Public Schools. 5, the Director of Private Schools. Number 6 is the UP President. Number 7, Chairman of UNESCO, National Commission of the Philippines. And number 8 is 8 members. President of the Philippines will appoint other 8 members or with the consent of Commission on Appointment. And it would be chosen from the following group. 1 from labor, number 2 from industry or management, number 3 for agriculture, number 4 for National Catholic Educational Association, number 5 Mohammedan or other cultural minority. What is the reason why we have to choose from the minority group? Because to more understanding on the minority or indigenous people or from the religious, from different religious beliefs. Number 6 is Philippine Association of Christian School. Number 7, Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities. And number 8, from the teaching profession. These 8 members shall serve for a period of 4 years, provided that the first appointment, the 3 members will be appointed for 1 year, 2 other members for 2 years, other members for 2 years, and the other 2 members will serve for 5 years. So that consists of 8 years. The Section 3 stated that the Secretary of Education, or in his absence, the Undersecretary of Education shall act as Chairman of the Board. That is the reason why we have Undersecretary, because in the absence of Secretary, the Undersecretary will take over the duties and responsibilities of the Secretary. So the Board shall serve in an honorary capacity. So what do we mean by this? They have no compensation and remuneration of their services. So no wages for the member of the board, except of course for the travel expenses whenever there is meeting of the board that they attended. Section 4 The board shall have the following powers and function. Number 1, to formulate the objectives and basic policies of education for children and adults in conformity with the philosophy and mandates of the Constitution. So, one of the basic function of the board is to formulate objectives and policies of education. Of course, it conforms with the philosophy mandated by the Constitution. And number 2, functions and power is to coordinate the objectives, functions, and activities of different types and kinds of educational institutions in the Philippines. So, one of the functions is to coordinate the objectives, functions, and activities to the educational institutions. And number 3, to set up general goals of accomplishments for the entire Philippine school system. So, the attainment of which shall be the objectives of policies and functions of all education institutions in the country are also responsible in setting up the general goals and accomplishment of Philippine school system. Section 5 stated that it shall be the exclusive agency of the government for the implementation of educational policies in the direction of educational interest of the nation, subject only to the constitutional authority of the President of the Republic over executive departments, bureaus, and offices. Basically, Section 5 is about implementation of educational policies. Section 6, the chairman of the board shall have the duties and functions. So, the chairman of the board will first call meetings of the board and preside over them. The chairman of the board also is the presiding overseer of the meeting. Number 2, to execute or implement decisions of the board and to see to it that educational policies approved by the board are duly complied with and followed by all schools. So, under Section 6, letter B is the execution and implementation of decisions by the chairman of the board. To ensure that the educational policies which approved by the board are duly complied with with all schools. Letter C is to perform all duties hereto prescribed by the law for the highest education officials of the land that are not inconsistent with the provision of this act. The chairman of the board will have to perform all duties assigned to her or prescribed by the law. It should be consistent with the provision of this act. Okay, letter D is to perform, or the chairman of the board is to perform such other duties that may be assigned to him or her by the board. Our Section 7, the board shall appoint its secretary and may request for the detail in its office of such personnel at the Department of Education or offices under it. The Section 7 stated that the appointment of the secretary. So Section 8 stated that all acts, executive orders, administrative circular, or regulations inconsistent with the provision of this act are hereby repealed. It should be in accordance with the provision or this act. Section 9, the sum of 100,000 pesos or so much thereof as may be necessary to carry out the purposes of this act is hereby authorized to be appropriated out of any funds in the National Treasury not otherwise appropriated. So, Section 9 is all about the funds, which is a minimum of 100,000 pesos or more. So, Section 10, this act shall take effect upon its approval. Let's go with the Republic Act number 1265. An act making flag ceremony compulsory in all educational institutions. So that's why every day before the class begin, flag ceremony, educational institution should have flag ceremony to perform. Section 1 of Republic Act number 1265. All educational institutions shall henceforth observe daily flag ceremony, which shall be simple and dignified and shall include playing or singing of the Philippine National Anthem. Section 2. The Secretary of Education is hereby authorized and directed to issue or cause to be issued rules and regulations for the proper conduct of the flag ceremony. Okay. The Secretary or the appointed Secretary of Education should be directed or issued to cause rules and regulations for proper conduct of flag ceremony, and the chairman or secretary of education is the authorized personnel to direct, issue the rules and regulations about the proper conduct of flag ceremony. Okay, or section 3, it stated that the failure or refusal to observe the flag ceremony provided by this act and in accordance with rules and regulations issued by the Secretary of Education after proper notice and hearing shall subject the educational institution concerned and its head to public censure as administrative punishment, which shall be published at least once in a newspaper or of general circulation. So meaning to say, a failure to observe ceremony should undergo administrative punishment, and that for the second offense to observe flag ceremony, the Secretary of Education, after the notice of hearing and after the proper notice and hearing, shall cause the cancellation of the recognition or permit of that private educational institution. Republic Act 1425. It is an act to include in the curricula of all public and private schools, colleges, and universities courses on the life, works, and writings of Jose Rizal, particularly his novels Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, authorizing the printing and distribution thereof and of other purposes. The act is about the integration of the life and works Rizal in our educational system. So, Section 1 stated that courses on the life, works, and writings of Jose Rizal, particularly his novel Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, shall be included in the curricula of all schools, colleges, and universities, public or private, provided that in the collegiate courses, the original or unexpurgated editions of Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo English translation shall be used as basic text. So what do we mean by unexpurgated? So it means that it should be an edited edition of Noli Me Tangere. It means that all parts of that novel should be the basic text to use in the collegiate courses. All parts should be present as original and should be the one to use as reference in the collegiate courses. Section 2 stated that it shall be obligatory on all schools, colleges, and universities to keep in the libraries an adequate number of copies of the original, and it should be obligatory on all universities to keep in the library adequate unexpurgated original edition of Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, unedited edition. Especially these two novels face a lot of controversies because of Rizal's attack to Catholicism. Section 3 stated that the Board of National Education shall cause the translation of Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo as well as other writings of Jose Rizal into English, Tagalog, and the principal Philippine dialects, cause them to be printed in cheap, popular edition, and cause them to be distributed free of charge to persons desiring to read them through the Purok organizations and barrio councils throughout the country. So, Section 4, nothing in this act shall be construed as amendment of repealing Section 927 of Administrative Code, prohibiting the discussion of religious doctrines by public school teachers and